people seem to skip over a little bit the image that a sniper's actually looking at when they're doing this job. When they're squeezing the trigger, you see it. You're not just firing in a general direction, you're looking at a human being and the impact of a round flying toward them. It does damage, and it's harrowing, to be honest. It's quite disturbing, and it disturbed me a lot. I ended up doing it a lot of times, and each of them stuck with me for various reasons.
SAS men jumped back onto the balcony and stalked. After 6 days and almost 11 hours exactly, the siege is over.
Ted Shirley, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, mate?
Hello. Absolutely smashing. Thank you for having me.
Actually, you reached out to me. So how did you find out about the podcast? Did you listen to us?
Yeah, it came up on my Instagram feed, actually. Yeah. Some stuff you were talking about that you just mentioned then, some sort of SF stuff come up, and I thought, ooh, this could be an interesting conversation. So yeah.
It's good. I always like to know how people find us and stuff like that. So it's great. So, I mean, I've got your book here, which is Afghanistan Sniper. We'll hold it up here. This is a great book, people. Holding a copy in front. And I liked it really for both reasons, well, for two reasons. It's both a great book about the military, your own experiences, becoming a sniper and then deploying to Afghanistan. And then it's a very honest account about your experiences afterwards, which I really like the honesty. I like the way you dealt with both of them. And we just said off air there, I really like the fact there was like no names, no pack drills. It was kind of like no dates. I just felt it read as a really honest account. And so I commend anyone to read it, really, mate.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Well, look, so we do usually do a quick bio. So I'll just do a very quick bios. You're One Royal Welsh, joined 2006, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
You did a Helmand tour 2008, and then you went over to sniper training, which is something we'll talk about because I found that really interesting. The black art of sniper training.
Yes.
No one knows anything about, including me. Well, no, I've got mates who are snipers, but dark art. And then, of course, and then the second Helmand tour, and then we'll talk at the end about what else happened. So maybe if we could take you all the way back to before you joined the military, did you have like at school some interest in the military or a family member or something?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, there'd been a few family members and people that I'd known growing up that had been in the military through various places. But yeah, I think my dad was in the Navy during the Falklands conflict. So that kind of created this idea. I think I'd listen to his stories and about the places he'd been and the people that he knew and all their stories, and I just thought, yeah, I'd absolutely love that. I want to go and see a bit of the world and meet all these people. And I think at a young age I thought, I'm going to love this. It was very much everything that I wanted to do revolved around that from very, very young.
Yeah. So you were at school and then you went straight from school into the military?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a long-winded way in, to be honest. So I left school and went on selection for the Royal Marines, ended up getting into the Royal Marines, and then in training, whoa, massive culture shock. Wasn't for me. I was not ready. My mind wasn't there ready. So I ended up coming out and then joining the army. 2 weeks from passing out of Catterick, I broke my foot on a battlefield tour, it was a very stupid story. A ruckus had happened on the ferry on the way there, and in my drunken state, I leapfrogged one of the lads trying to do some cool stuff and didn't realise he was at the top of the stairs. So I went, boom, straight down to the bottom, broke my foot. But I pushed on. I pushed on for another week, but yeah, couldn't do it. So I ended up having to then go into this whole rehab situation, and finally then got to my unit.
We used to call them battlefield tours for that reason. Unfortunately, if you take a bunch of soldiers away to look at a battlefield, particularly one in France, where a lot of them were, because if it's a Normandy or wherever, everyone just hits the bottle. I don't know what it is.
Instantly, yeah. I don't think ITC Catterick were allowed to do battlefield tours for a few years after that one. So that's a little claim to fame for us.
They're carnage. So where were you at school? Were you at school in Wales? Was that the link?
Yeah, in North Wales, yeah. So I grew up on the North Wales coast. I had a great childhood. It was surrounded by either beaches or mountains and woodland and stuff. So it was amazing.
Beautiful up there. I love it. I love that area actually,
Yeah,
Harlech and all that. It's,
yeah,
such a lovely part of the world. Yeah. So then you're Catterick, and then you go through. You finish basic training, get posted to your unit, and then how? So what? So when did Helmand was Afghan started by then when you joined? So you had joined up.
yes.
It had kicked off, hadn't it?
Yeah,
So
it'd been going for a while then. So my first tour of Helmand was 2008. So I got to my unit, which were based out in Cyprus. So that was my first posting, which was amazing. I was having the best start to my career ever. So yeah, the party continued in Cyprus, and I was only there for a few weeks before I was off onto my first tour. So it was quite daunting, I think, at first. I was excited, but when I joined the Royal Welsh, everyone had been on multiple tours and they'd been in the thick of it for quite some time. There'd been that, you know, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghan stuff. So I got there to all these war-hardened blokes, and I was a bit nervous, but it was such a sort of family-orientated regiment that instantly there was a few wings that I got under, and I ended up fitting straight in. It was great. Everyone was sort of from the same kind of areas, and we had that bond, that Welshman bond. So it was great. So I kind of once I'd settled in, I couldn't wait to get going then on my first tour.
yeah, I mean, your Welsh, the Welsh sort of comes through quite strongly because it goes on to when you become a sniper and all the Welsh boys are sticking together, which I think people don't really understand. It's like if you're a Scotsman, you'll stick together. If you're Welsh, you'll stick together. Irish will stick together. The English, you don't really stick together. We just don't have that. We don't have that going on. We amalgamated, actually, my original regiment, amalgamated with the Irish, and they sort of took over.
Yeah,
They
that's
definitely
kind of what we did on
definitely tried to
well,
take over anyway. So you must have been quite a newbie then, so you'd done 2 weeks. You hadn't done the beat up before Afghan. You go out there. Were you in a rifle company? What were you doing on your first
Yeah, I
tour?
was straight into a rifle company, strapped up with a UGL for the first time, and
UGL.
very excited.
You better explain what a UGL is to those.
And an underslung grenade launcher. Yeah, so I was cutting about, living my dream. As sort of crazy as that seems, it was a kinetic tour. We were in a place called Musakala, which was a very active area. So yeah, it was a good introduction to infantry life, I think. But I did well, performed well, and enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it, to be honest. But it did make me want to think I don't want to stay as a rifleman. I want to keep pushing. Obviously, it took me so long to kind of get to where I wanted to be that I didn't really want to waste any time. I wasn't messing around. I knew I wanted to be a sniper. I'd always known I wanted to be a sniper.
Yeah, I mean, we had interesting that because we had a bit of a crossover with Musakala. A lot of people talk about Musakala because there were some very tough times in Musakala with Royal Irish Paras. I mean, I've had a lot of them talking to me about it since I did a podcast with Stuart Tootle. So when you were there, it was quite active. 2000. So this is 2008. Still pretty hot with Taliban and the IED threat.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, we were kind of on a rotation through about 3 or 4 different locations, but we were there because we were the QRF, so the Quick Reaction Force, being based out in Cyprus, because it was such a hot location. We ended up getting drafted in there, but it was good. It was good. Solidified in me that I'm doing the right thing. This is what I want to be doing.
Yeah, and then when with the snipers, there were obviously snipers in the battalion, were there? And you saw that, and you thought that's where I want to go, rather than special forces, because that could have been another thought in your head, maybe.
But yeah, that very much was so. Yeah, I kind of had this plan in mind that SF selection was something that I really wanted to push towards, and it was a promise that I kind of made to myself from a young age that I'd give a go, and it's something that still bugs me a little bit today that I never actually got to go and give it a crack.
I think they're recruiting, Ted. I think they're recruiting, mate. I think the opportunity is still out there if you ever wanted to go back.
Yeah, I think I'm done. I'll leave it to the young lads now.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best. They're not going to get me. Well, yeah. So that's interesting. So you come back from that tour, and then how did it work with sniper selection? So did you volunteer within your own unit for that? How does that work? How does it work getting on the course?
Yeah, so I ended up just sort of, I was in a guard room one day talking, and someone said, "Oh, yeah, there's a carder running actually." Da da da. Ended up putting my name down, and it was before the sort of pre-selection phase, so everyone would go through these various aptitude tests and sort of physical testing, and then those that sort of rose to the top of that phase, we were then off and sent to Scotland for, well, the first phase is 3 months up there. So yeah, it was all going to plan. It was,
Yeah.
it was
I mean,
wow.
I like your descriptions of that. I mean, it's kind of like this thing about, I mean, a lot of probably civilians don't realize this, but like one of the key things I always think about any good soldier, any good officer is their ability to navigate. It's that skill of maybe turning like a two-dimensional image into a picture in your head. And I loved your descriptions in sniper training of how you go, okay, you're like given a grid for the target, but you don't
Yes.
know where you are. So you've got to reverse engineer where you are from being dropped
Yeah.
off the back of the van. I've been there. Like you get chucked out the back, they're going, okay, where am I? I
Shit.
have no idea.
Yeah, I'd
And
say,
you
yeah,
sometimes don't have a
exactly
sketch
that.
map. It's like, but then you do that. You think, okay, I've got to get to the target, and that's going to be higher, and I'm going to get in amongst this
Yeah,
area, and that's going to be a good shot. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff because even though I've been in the military, we don't know what you guys do. The black art of snipers. You guys are there,
it's very
and you're
shrouded.
called on, and you're part of the battalion, and you know you're part of the SAS or whatever. But yeah, so talk a bit about that. So you start on this 3-month course up in Scotland with some
Yes.
other Welsh blokes as well, which is important. Yeah,
Yeah, so it was throughout the army, loads of people, I think maybe 100 or so blokes turned up for the course. Out of that, 8 of us were Welshmen. So there was me and 4 others from the 1st Battalion, which was my battalion, and then 3 others from the 2nd Battalion. So we all sort of bunked up in a room straight away, being Welshmen. We sort of had that bond. And then off we went. So it was a case of very rapid lessons that were very intense. So maths has never been my thing. I've always struggled with it, but I had to get a grip of it real quick there. It all starts in classrooms where you sort of learn about the weapon systems, and then the theoretical side of shooting. So all these calculations that come into play, you know, with things like biometric pressure, which I've never heard of in my life, you know, stuff like that, and how wind acts and how it affects a round. And, you know, we sort of learnt to picture wind as if it was water in a way, and how it would react when it hits a building, where it goes. And there was a method to all this madness for sure, but it was mind-boggling in the beginning. It was crazy. But that desire between those of us that managed to stick that part of the course out was quite obvious. We were all there because we wanted to be snipers. Everyone there really wanted it, and those that sort of couldn't get their head around it, the learning curve's that steep, and it's such a fast-paced course that there's not really any chance to kind of pick up where you left off if you fall behind. So you're kind of constantly under that pressure of late night studying, and which was new to me completely.
yeah. I mean, it sounded tough, and it is a selection process. You pass that, and then you go on to the second phase. So you can shoot, right?
Yes.
Amazingly well. By the sounds that you put a lot of the rounds down range, and
Yeah.
then you've also got the nav, the physical tests, and you've passed that, and now you go on to the. It's like a testing phase, the second phase of the course. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the sort of the tactical phase of it. So this is where you put a ghillie suit on for the first time. You know, you make your ghillie shroud, you go through the time-honoured tradition of weathering your ghillie suit, which is crawling through all sorts of nasties for a few kilometres to get it nice and natural looking. But you go through things like sniper history lessons and stuff, so you learn about various snipers throughout the years and throughout the wars, their kit, equipment, techniques that they used. At this point, you start to realize that it's actually a really creative job. You need quite an imagination to sort of do these things, like you were talking earlier about moving, the part I talk in the book about moving on a stalk. You have to have all these things come into play, like where's the sun going to be? What's the wind doing? What are the wildlife doing? What's the terrain like? And this is where you learn that craft, and you kind of become invisible, really. You know, it quite often you'd get 60 seconds to become invisible. And it was the kind of thing that if you failed these sorts of things along the way, again, there would be cuts all the way up until the final week, which is test week then, which is where you go through everything that you've learned, and which culminates mostly the main things are the observation post exercise. This is the thing that people hear about when you're there for days on end and, underground and shitting in bags and all sorts, all that good stuff that everyone goes on about. That's where that happens, and things like your final stalk as well, which is what we were talking about then in the book. But it becomes very apparent that there's way more than just shooting. In fact, the shooting side of it probably makes up 30% of being a sniper. It's all very much to do with calm, slow, calculated movements to ensure you stay invisible, really. And
Yeah, I
extra.
mean, your description's good of the craft. For people who don't know, Gillies comes from Scotland. They used to stalk deer. Yeah, that was what they used to do. And your suit
Yeah.
is made up, and you usually personalize it, and then you weather it yourself. It's such a sort of art and craft of the whole thing, and the way you talk about it. It's very vivid, and it reminded me. I don't know, things like For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is Ernest Hemingway book. It's kind of that very detailed understanding and description of what it's like to be in this situation and how this craft is adopted by you. And it is an art. I mean, there's no nice, it is,
Yeah.
it in a way harks back to it's a duel in a way, because ultimately what you're doing, if there's another sniper at the other end, you are literally a duelist. You two are going to
Yeah.
go head to head over a very long distance. Your concealment and his concealment are going to be what counts. And that comes out actually later in the book.
It does, yeah. The enemy sniper chapter, which
Yeah. I mean, so I loved the final test because I never know how that happened. And you talk about making your 2 shots, which I thought was great. And they have I love the fact that you're lying there and the guy who's spotting you's walking, you hear his footsteps coming towards you. He's literally got a big arrow. So when they look at you, they point the arrow. You must be going, there's a remote, they go, oh, the arrow's on my head. And you have
yeah,
you do,
it
get stand up and get
It
humiliated.
happened on the course, not to me, thankfully. But yeah, it's such a horrible feeling, that just waiting for someone to come and plonk that luminous arrow on your head and bail. No,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then there's people, I mean, we're going to have to talk, Steve-O and this friend of yours who you helped
yes,
with the course, which we'll talk about him a bit later on. And then Daz is one of the instructors as well.
yes,
These
yeah,
characters who you obviously, and I know this from, when you're training in these environments and going through this stuff, you become very close with both the instructors
yeah,
and the people you go through the course with. I mean, that's a very, very close bond. It's like a brotherhood, basically.
yes,
So if anything happens to them, that's going to affect you, which
yeah.
you talk about honestly later on.
Yeah,
But let's press on. So you pass the course. You're now a sniper.
yes,
Go back, and then you talk about the sort of there's the beat up training before you go to the next Helmand tour. So you go to
yeah,
Africa.
yeah. So we'd kind of been away from our units now for 6 months. So that's how long the course is, which I didn't realise the Americans were very surprised at the length of our sniper course. They thought it was just a few weeks. I said, no, there's a reason we're bloody good. So, yeah, we've been away for 6 months. Everyone else has been doing their sort of beat up training, the pre-deployment stuff. And everyone's starting to operate at this really sort of high level, where everyone's fighting fit and match ready. And then we deployed to Kenya for 2 months, which was the kind of culmination of all this training everyone had been doing since the last tour. And that was the most amazing experience. Just the wildlife for me was just this, like living in some sort of David Attenborough episode. It was absolutely incredible. There was one morning where we saw a lion take down a zebra on a dawn attack, and it still blows my mind to this day. It really, really does. That was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, but now we're Helmand 2009, 2010. So things are and you've been before, so you know what you're going into, and now you know what role you've got going in there. So this is kind of a different level, probably for you and within your battalion and battle group. Going on the tour.
Very much so, yeah. So our battalion didn't have a sniper platoon. It was kind of an on and off kind of thing. So us newly formed snipers we created that platoon. So the battalion was then sort of learning how to use us again, and we were coming forward to our commanders and saying, "Look, this is what we've been learning over the last 6 months, and this is what we are now kind of capable of," you know. And it took a little while, a few weeks for that to kind of settle in, and then it just started running really, really smoothly. So the way that we were going to operate wasn't a kind of traditional way of a sniper. We were going to be a part of the rifle companies and also be acting alone. So without spotters, which was that brought pressure, a lot of pressure. Knowing we knew that we were going to be under pressure as snipers because we were this new asset that, you know, was available for everyone to use as and when they needed it. But we didn't, well, I didn't especially realize how that pressure was going to come in different forms. In the end, most of it came from me. Most of that pressure, it was never through orders or peers or anything like that. It was that I'd built up over, I suppose, my time on the sniper cadre. I built up this role of what I perceived I would be doing as a kind of Overwatch protector, and that protector role then came into play as soon as we got over there.
Yeah, I suppose because you think because my weapon's got a longer reach, I can protect the guys and I can do that. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I mean, it's interesting because so just suppose civilians listen to this show as well. So just a spotter, a sniper team's usually two people. One's the shooter, and then next to them they have someone spotting the round and helping.
Yes, it was also a sniper.
Yeah.
So you usually work in your pairs and you'd swap over and stuff, but they're doing things like telling you the range, you know, telling you the adjustments to your scope and all these sort of things, what the wind's doing. So you as the shooter, then you've got one job, and that is concentrate on making that shot as smooth as possible.
And we should
having to do both is quite tricky.
Yeah, so that's an added pressure that you don't have someone else alongside you.
Yeah.
And also, I guess, because they haven't got their head down the scope, they might have a bit more awareness around them, what's going on in terms of the battle and stuff going on.
Yeah, there was always a thing that we were always sure to have both our eyes open when we're looking down the scope until the final moment, because you need that situational awareness, because it is very, very easy to sort of get that tunnel vision and not realise what was going on around you. As one of the lads found out, there was a day where it was almost like a cartoon of bullet holes around his body. And he just didn't realise. Yeah,
that was a guy who was dragged out by his heels because he just got in the zone, and you know, and you talk about it being a bubble, which I think.
Yeah, I refer to it as my bubble. That was something that in the second phase of the training cadre, that's where you hone in that sort of thing. So this is where you are doing your judging of your distances and you're applying the calculations that you need to, but you also refer back to the phase one, which is the shooting bit, where you realize just how important things like breath is, exactly when to fire, how to breathe, how to slow your heart rate down. Every position or potential firing position, you'll have your own little nooks and kind of formations. You might move a foot slightly to an inch to the left, and it'll mean that you're definitely on each time. Certain sequences. So for me, for instance, I would squeeze the grip of the weapon and then release my fingers almost like a piano playing kind of shape. And it meant that I would have the same pressure and consistency every time I fired. So it's doing all those kind of things. That is what my bubble would incorporate. And then it would kind of, everything would fade out then and hyper focus would take over.
I mean, I think that's such a good description because it's almost like a zen. It's like a zone you go into in order to take the shot. And you obviously talk about that, the mental aspect, because it comes out later on that you go into this zone where you have to ignore, if there's bullets cracking past your head, you have to ignore all that, go to the zone, which is why your mate gets dragged by his heels because there's actually a firefight going on.
Yeah.
And he's not aware that he's being shot at and they're hitting the wall around him.
Yeah.
Because he's going, I'm going to make this shot.
So just so focused. That's it. You do get into that. So you have to be in that zone. If can you imagine if your heart's going like crazy and your adrenaline is in control rather than you're not going to be a very effective sniper. So the whole thing would be pointless unless you can achieve that level of calm under fire.
And we'll we'll talk a bit about some of the shots you took. So I mean, surely 300 meters, mate, I could probably hit something, but I like some of the stuff you just took. The descriptions are good. But the other thing I really liked was your description of the Ministry of Defence sent someone down to your ranges before. This is when you're in training. So there's a big debate. Basically, for the civilian audience, automatic weapons is a weapon. When you pull the trigger, the gas recoils the rifle and recocks it and puts a new round in the chamber. If you keep the finger depressed, it goes fully automatic and it can kick out a lot of rounds. That's a machine gun. So we basically have a weapon systems from the First World War where that happens. And the argument has always been, if you're on fully automatic or single shot, like you've got bolt action, or you don't use it on fully automatic. And you had this actually, tell me about the test you actually had on the ranges, because I loved that. Where they said, basically they're assessing whether snipers are better value than machine guns on fully automatic.
Yeah, very much so. So a platoon of machine gunners were brought up one day as we were on the shooting ranges. So we, as snipers, ran up with them up to the ranges, and it was decided that a test would go down. So various targets would pop up at different altitudes, different ranges, various different places in embankments and all these kinds of things. The machine gunners would have to all lay down and go crazy until they dropped them all, and then it was our turn. So the idea was to see, first of all, how fast the machine gunners could do it, and second of all, how many rounds it would take. It ended up taking something like 1.5 minutes for the machine gunners to take all these targets down, and thousands and thousands of rounds. And it took us something like 18 seconds, I think it was. All the Welshmen, we took these targets out, and it was laughable. It was, everyone there was just kind of like, what a waste of time this was. We could have told her this answer. So yeah, the government suit was sent away with his tail between his legs quite easily once we showed.
It's such a lesson. They did I mean, not similar, but I remember doing that on ambush training, trying to do it on fully automatic, and then everyone was put your weapon on single shot, and the difference is astronomical. So anyone out there who's going through basic training, don't use your weapon on fully. There's a time and a place to use it on fully automatic. Going into rooms and clearing it, or if you're in the GPMG team and you need to use it as an area weapon. But actually, if you're aiming the shots, funnily enough, you're going to hit people with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's quality rather than quantity.
From Ted the Sniper, right? And so this is going. So now, sorry, we skipped back a bit, but we're going forward. So you now deploy to Helmand. But before you deploy, there's this awful thing. It's Steve-O, isn't it? He's your mate. You've helped him, and there's a scene where you help him through a physical test where you guys, all the Welshmen, get around him, and he's lagging because he's eating a breakfast. Yeah. And you push him through, and then you find out he deploys ahead of you, and he gets hit by an IED. I mean, that must have been.
That was absolutely gut-wrenching. It was the first time that it had happened to me, the first time I'd known someone that had been killed in Afghan. So that in itself kind of brought a load of realities crashing down on me, that I was going soon, and, this could happen to me. It could happen to someone else that I know. It became really real. But I remember getting a call off one of the other sniper guys telling me that our mate Steve-O had been killed, and it was just this horrendous feeling, like the pit of my stomach fell out. That, seeing his face all over the news was just horrendous. It ended up filling me with anger, and that was the way that I ended up dealing with that situation. Anger and vengeance filled me. So I was then in a mindset, deploying on my second tour, my first tour as a sniper, I was in a mindset of not a positive, way of thinking. I was going there for a reason, very much with our friend in mind. Because, having gone to his funeral and, seeing streets lined with hundreds and hundreds of people and TV cameras outside the church, and then, seeing his mum and the pain that she was going through, it was impossible for us not to take that with us, to be honest. As an entire platoon, we held that one pretty close to our hearts, to be fair.
It's interesting that, because in the book you mentioned this, there's a Genghis Khan quote you mentioned, which is "I'm the punishment of the Lord," which dates back to 13th century Uzbekistan. Genghis Khan was basically, he went and punished a city because of their evil.
Yeah.
And you use that quote. You also use another religious quote, which is Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. Was that like, were you religious at all? Or
No,
spiritual? Where did that stuff come from, do you think? Or was it just your visceral reaction?
I think it was. Do you know what? I really don't know. The psalm I knew a bit of, but it ended up being from some film. It was a changed version. That I think it just got me into the place that I needed to be in mentally. It got me to a zone that made me feel invincible. Firstly, I was always positive that I wasn't going to be injured or killed. I was always in that mindset, and I held that confidence of my training. And I think these things, the quotes, they just instilled that confidence in me. The Genghis Khan one, in hindsight, potentially that was something that I was saying in order to justify in a way, although I'm not a religious person, never have been. I think the words resonated with me, and I think that it was a way of reminding me almost as well as why I was there. I was there because people were doing real bad stuff to innocent people, and they needed help. And I'm the kind of person that if someone's doing something wrong, I'm gonna say something. It bites me in the arse sometimes, but hey ho. But yeah, that was me. That's why I was that was why I was there. So yeah, they reinforced that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels really powerful and it comes out later on in your experiences. This idea, I'm the punishment of the Lord is a pretty powerful statement. When you connect that with the death of a friend and the fact you're about to go into combat with the sniper's rifle, it's like, I think that's a pretty powerful mix, Ted, to go to war with.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and throw in that I'm a 21-year-old by the time I'm a sniper. Yeah, that is so young. It's so young. So yeah, I think I was just using anything that I could, to be honest, to help me do what I needed to do and what was required of me. But there was also other things, there was, I suppose, a sense of pride that the United Kingdom had for troops then. It was on the telly every day. It was on everyone's minds. This fight against terrorism was huge. So, yeah, I think there was a lot of context that later on down the line, I had to piece all these things together and realize what that concoction actually did inside my head.
I mean, it's interesting. So you deploy, and then early on you're in vehicles, aren't you? And you talk about being stationed with the Estonian battalion. Is that
Yeah,
right? Yeah. And
yeah.
the Afghan National Army.
Yes, that was quite a strange experience, that one. So we arrived in a fob that was ran by the Estonians. They had a bunch of snipers there that we were going to be working with. But yeah, there was an Afghan army unit there, and at the time there was a lot of stuff going on with Taliban infiltrating the army and the police. And it turned out that, yeah, I talk about this in the book, that one of these guys in the Afghan army unit was in fact a Taliban infiltrator. That was a daunting feeling, that, and one that from that point on happened, quite a few times during the Afghan conflict. Um, Again, that is another thing that adds to this layer of context. Imagine being in that state where there's no trust. There's, anything could happen at any moment. And this is why, I talk quite a lot nowadays on podcasts, and I give talks to troops and veterans and stuff like that about the reaction that our nervous system has to that kind of environment and how things like that can progress into mental health issues. But we'll we'll come into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, it's that thing that if you can't trust the people that are on your team. Sorry, FOB is forward operating base people. So you're in a forward operating base crewed by the Estonians, Afghan National Army. But then you do work with an Afghan special forces unit. So you do that advanced contact. So you're advancing on a compound and new snipers being pushed out ahead. But it sounds like that special forces unit was quite good. They seem to go off down the road.
Yeah. There was one of them, this is irrelevant, but one of them could do a spinning kick 3 times in the air before he landed. So I thought, right, yeah, he's going to do all right. But yeah, they turned out that they were pretty kick-ass. Mad as a box of frogs. But yeah, they, on that day in particular, they just ran at this compound and dealt with it.
Yeah. I mean, and then so you get quite stuck into it, because then there's a situation where, because I'm just going to run through the little things in your book that I picked up. One was going into that hot helicopter landing site, which sounded pretty tough. So that's when helicopters are landing and you're under fire immediately, which is not the ideal scenario to try and get out of the back of a helicopter.
No, very much like the opening of Saving Private Ryan. That's what it reminds me of, as the back of the boats are going down. That's how it felt. It wasn't that bad, obviously, but yeah, that's how it felt. It was very unnerving.
I mean,
rounds pinging off the side and seeing RPGs flying through the air, soaring past as Chinooks are banking over to the side to avoid them. And it was a good start to the day.
I mean, yeah. So then on that particular operation, you then get into this thing. I wanted to talk about this because your role now, okay, so you're up on rooftops and stuff like that, protecting the compounds you're in or overseeing troops that are doing something. And you talk a little bit about what are called dickers. So dickers for civilians are people, generally unarmed people, because you can't kill them if they're unarmed unless they're doing something to threaten your unit because of what we call the rules of engagement. But you're observing this. So it's like, I was quite interested by that because there's a lot of talk about the decisions to shoot or not to shoot, which you are up close and personal with a scope on all sorts of enemy, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
It must mess with your head. You literally have a life or death decision to make.
Yeah, very much so. Regularly as well. One thing that was always instilled to us, once we'd become snipers, was that we would, from that point then, have the ear of our commanders. And if we had to trump a situation, if we genuinely stood by our own decisions and thought that something was the best decision, we could act on that. And rightfully so, because there is so much more information that you can gather when you're looking down a sniper scope. You can read people's faces, which is a big one. You can see, there was many times when I'd be looking down my scope at somebody and be able to tell whether they were a trained individual or not, or if they were frightened or if they weren't. You can tell these things. People seem to skip over a little bit the image that a sniper's actually looking at when they're doing this job. When they're squeezing the trigger, you see it. You're not just firing in a general direction, you're looking at a human being and the impact of a round flying toward them. It does damage, and it's harrowing, to be honest. It's quite disturbing, and it disturbed me a lot. I ended up doing it a lot of times, and each of them stuck with me for various reasons.
I think that's, I mean, thanks for being honest, because I think that's something people don't, first of all, most people deploying on operations don't fire their weapons. Secondly, if you do, even if you get to fire a weapon in combat, you probably don't see the enemy. You probably can't even see what they're doing. And often you stand off and you're calling in an airstrike, or you're calling in heavier weapons. You're one of the few people who will see very, very clearly what you've done through your scope.
Yeah, very much so. It's, again, I'm trying to paint this picture of, I think it's important for me to say that I wrote Afghanistan Sniper not to be a war story. It had to give context, and that's why I don't give, I go into some details, but a lot of things are skipped over and stuff. This was all about painting that picture and giving insight into what troops go through, and later on, if troops or veterans are going through this, then this is as open and honest as I can be and give them as much information as possible. So that's why this was written. Yeah, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
No, it's because I was going to draw out of you that first description because it's quite powerful. So the one where
Yeah,
you shoot the guy in the neck, because that comes back to haunt you basically. That, and then you see him reaching out, and you realize he's reaching out for his mate. His mate comes out, and you shoot him. So you've dropped
yeah,
killed two people, and you've
yeah,
seen that clearly.
yeah. And it's, it's not just that's the flash and then off you go and everything carries on. There's that, and then the impact, the moments after that, which are, in the book, I don't talk about in the book. I've never talked about it sort of in too much detail. Not through, it's been processed. I've very much done the work on it, and it doesn't have the effect on me that it used to. But it's graphic. It is horrendous. The image, or if you could put it into a film, it would be nasty. But yeah, they just kept coming in this courtyard area, one after the other. And in the end, it was 13 hours that I stayed on that rooftop for, and we had been surrounded by a couple of hundred Taliban, which were fighting their very hardest to get up to the walls and stuff that were around us. And the guys on the ground that were around me were fighting like lions. They were giving it everything they had to keep them away from the walls. And I'm going through all this that we're talking about up on a little tiny rooftop, having to stay calm and be in this bubble of absolute concentration. Otherwise, I'd never would have been able to make these shots, So those shots that I'm talking about are 750 meters away, which isn't a huge distance, but, for a sniper, but it still requires concentration. So yeah, there was a lot of sort of, I suppose, I don't know, compartmentalization in a way where try not to worry too much about what's going on around me, which is, I suppose, a skill that I've now learned and can bring into my day-to-day life. I don't worry too much about anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, just talking about how civilians, like, you're sent into this situation, you're a professional soldier, that's your job. Once this starts, so the Taliban are trying to sort your position, your job is to kill them and keep killing them and stop that. Because if you're not doing it, you're not protecting your mates and you're not part of the team. I think that there's a lack of understanding in the political world and a lack of understanding in the general public that this is not a game of football or rugby once you get
Yeah.
sent there. What
No.
happens on the other end of the rifles and what happens to the people you sent there is a
Yeah.
big deal.
Massive deal. Massive deal. I think, yeah, people making decisions to send troops, they need to hear this. They need to know what it's like and what it does to. So I started my career wanting so badly to do this. And then as I was doing it, I was slowly realizing that, wow, there's so much that doesn't get spoken about this job. And everyone kind of hides it. I'm not here to hide anything. I'm here to be brutally honest and let people know the truth that war is horrendous. It is horrible.
But presumably when you're fighting, obviously you're not processing anything then, you're just doing your job. And like everyone, all of us, we put it to one side, you're going to have to do the job for which you were trained and the job which you've been sent there to do. And
Yeah.
presumably you afterwards, I don't know, when you're processing it that evening, I mean, this becomes a cumulative thing, I think, doesn't it, Ted, with you once you start
Yes.
killing people?
Yeah, it was almost like that day, I let my walls down in a way. Very much they were built up as you imagine most people do, but I let them down and I started to then humanize, I suppose, the targets. I started to imagine how much it hurt, how frightening it would have been, what the repercussions of them no longer being here are for other people, family members, friends. I started to think of all these things, and it was like a millisecond. As soon as I started to do that, it was in. That was it. It was in. That side coupled with the anger that I felt from the death of our friend a few months earlier, And it was just this juxtaposition of confusion, a lot of confusion, but a drive and desire to do the job still. And I thought, it, as we said there, it accumulated. I thought that there would be a moment where it just didn't bother me anymore, and then I would then continue. But that moment never happened. It took many years to figure out actually what did happen.
Yeah, and so you're still in Afghan at this point, so we have that battle, and then it's called Op Mushtarak. Is that right? The big operation. Is that the right name for it?
Operation Mushtarak. Yeah. So this is the second, well, the biggest air assault since the Second World War, and it was phenomenal. It was a sight to see. So 82 helicopters did wave after wave after wave of dropping troops right onto Taliban-held ground, and I was in the lead Black Hawk chopper on the way there, which was quite the experience. And you've read in the book, I nearly fell out of it on the way there.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask you. Sorry, we're lighten a bit. I always it gets to me the amount of kit you guys had to carry.
Yeah.
And as a sniper, you've got a helmet. I hated body armor. I was crap in my day anyway. I think we used to sit on it in vehicles so we didn't get our balls blown off because I thought, if I die with no balls, I'd rather be dead. So we stuff it under our asses. But that's because I was in the 90s. You had body armor, helmet. How the hell are you supposed to take a shot with all this shit?
I know. It would drive me mad. It really would drive me mad. You'd sort of put your head down, this bloody helmet, and especially if you had MVGs on it, night vision goggles, and all that sort of stuff. There's no wonder I've got chronic neck pain now. I'm telling you.
It was actually interesting because I interviewed Stuart Tootle, who was the CO on the first tour, and he said back then, don't give them this body armor. It's too heavy. It's too heavy to operate in. Yeah, he said, don't do it.
I ended up taking it off more often than not. I'd take my helmet off and take the body armor off, and I'd just put my cap on.
So
be in the zone.
So anyway, there you go in on the Black Hawk, nearly falling out the door, rescued by your mate, dropped in the biggest air assault, since the Second World War, and then you land to hear the mosque going. Your interpreter Mike going, the Taliban are shouting over from the mosque Tannoy in the nearby village to the civilians, leave now while you've still got the chance or whatever. It's like,
yeah, they offered salvation to us rather than a certain death. But to be fair, it was a harrowing kind of thing to hear. But at this point, if I've already talked about how my mindset's gone, we'd become dogs of war by now, very much so, and we welcomed the fight. We saw the people of the town move out, and it was heartbreaking, to be honest, to watch all these people upend their entire lives or anything they could carry, all their animals, their children and everything, and just get out of there. It was very sad. It kind of, for me, it made me think, well, let's try and deal with this as quickly as possible, so those people can come back. And, in the end, they did end up coming back. The locals did return, and shops opened up again, and all, schools opened up again, even though they were very much under attack. We did our job and we protected them. So it was good. But yeah, that first move in on that morning was very tense. As the Taliban are sort of talking over this Tannoy system, saying all this stuff to us, warning everyone that there's going to be the holiest of battles, they're kind of thinking, this might actually step up a notch from everything else that we've experienced so far. Did, to a certain extent, it did. We were very much in a stronghold area. But that morning, we ended up getting fired at by an RPG and a burst of AK-47 rounds, and I ended up taking out the insurgent that morning, which was the first of the operation. So kind of we started on the right foot in a way. We showed we weren't to be messed with, and we weren't, to be fair. The Royal Welsh pulled off some magnificent stuff on that operation.
Yeah, I mean, from an operational point of view, you were doing your job. Did you ever? But the thing is, I suppose this is my thing, having never been to Afghan. Would you ever get a feeling? Because as an officer, you would have had feeling of the bigger picture, how did you feel things were going operationally? Did you ever get a picture? Because there was a commander who said to you at the beginning of that deployment something like, some of you may not come back, which is not the most useful briefing to be given when you're going.
It was, I think it was fitting, I think. And I think it did its job, to be honest. Although quite shocking to hear, it switched everyone on. And we were operating on it as a really well-oiled machine. But it did feel different. It felt like everything had been a build-up to this operation. But also there was the feeling that we were winning. We were pushing the Taliban back. We were taking more and more ground, as with further south, I think it was Marja with the US Marines. They had a huge part in this operation as well. So we were sort of two ends of it and closing in. So it was good. I feel operationally things were moving well on Afghanistan in general at that point. The Afghan army and Afghan police were playing more of a role. And the handover was kind of, I don't know, it was being talked about back then. You know, it was potential. It was potentially going to happen.
Yeah. And so, and I've just got to talk to you because you do, that's the op where you do this amazing shot, 1,456 meters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a record?
No, it's not. It's for me. No, not for me. Bloody hell, it's insignificant. I think the furthest one might even be 3 kilometers by now. I think. Yeah, there's been some crazy long shots, but yeah, it was amazing for me. It was like a movie, sniper movie moment. You know, a mile away, I was kind of, my skills were put to the test, I suppose, in a way. But yeah, that day I was just playing cards with some of the guys, and it came over the radio that another one of our teams had come under contact a few kilometers away, and could I jump on the roof and have a look? So I did, but not really expecting to see anything so far away. And then I saw them. So there was three Taliban with AK-47s, and they were walking in a single file. Now, I thought this was due to the IED threat in the area. Maybe they'd planned to do this sort of shoot and scoot situation where they fire a few rounds and then do a runner, hoping that the British troops would follow them down this path of IEDs. So that's why I thought they were doing that. But after watching them, I could tell that the guy in the centre was controlling the other two. He was in command. So eventually I came up with this plan of what I wanted to do. And this again, so this now shows where my mind really was at this point. So I'd become very callous at this point and kind of unforgiving, really. That for everything. The people around me, I was very short-tempered, very aggressive and angry. And I wanted to inflict terror, I suppose. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to achieve. So the plan was to take out the rear insurgent, then take out the one at the front, and then finally take out their commander. So that is what I did. My first shot, however, missed, which I was absolutely gutted about because I thought I'd got it all bang on. But no, I needed a few more clicks to the right, and so I sent my second round, and that struck the insurgent at the rear in the chest, and he sort of fell back, kind of folded in half. And as that's happened, the commander and the front of their little mini patrol have turned round. As soon as they've realised what's going on, I've let loose my next round, which is then took out the front insurgent, and then the commander's realised what's going on. So there was only one place that he could run to in the location he was at, and that was a small opening to an alleyway, which if he would have got to it, he would have got away. So I've then moved over, got my crosshairs in this alleyway entrance, and just waited for him to enter my sight picture, released the next round, and it's gone through his torso. And as soon as I did that, radio lit up, and an American Apache pilot had been up in the skies and observed the whole thing, witnessed it all, and commended me on my shooting. saying, "Tell that sniper that was some damn good shooting." I don't know, but it's something like that. So I was kind of in a bit of a whirlwind of emotions for a moment. Well, I say that, but I wasn't. There was a point I didn't mention in the book. One of the lads who was on the roof next to me, he said, "Put your hand down," and I put my hand down, and it was perfectly still, perfectly still. And he was like, "That's fucking mad, that." And we just kind of went about it, and then we all started getting off the roof, and guys on the ground were sort of congratulating me on making shots from a mile away, which was huge, you know, and it was fell on deaf ears. I instantly started to have this strange feeling, like all their voices were sort of muffled. I couldn't really hear anyone. The outer edges of my eyes had started to kind of blacken, and I was losing focus. I felt like my body had become extremely heavy and it was hard to move. And I just walked, didn't say a word, walked around the corner into the little courtyard bit outside the front of the room that I was staying in, and just sat there smoking for hours with my eyes just wide open with this glaze over them, and just replaying all the shots that I'd made on that tour, one after the other, this just montage of bang, 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 and it kept going faster and faster and faster. And I just wasn't in control of it. There was nothing I could do. I was sort of hearing people screaming my name in the distance, and things had gotten to this point now where I was in real trouble. I was a casualty.
Why do you think, Ted? Why was it straight after that shot? Was there something that kind of unleashed in you? Do you ever thought about like what the? Because
Yeah, I
obviously,
have
had you
thought.
been having? Sorry, I'll ask you a question. Had you been waking up at night before that? Like, had you been having dreams before that, or anything?
Yeah, yeah. So I had been struggling with intrusive thoughts. So the sort of video films kind of thing that I call them, that would play in the back of my mind, they'd been happening. Nightmares had been happening, and it was like a gradual build up of aggression and anger and irritability I was just this ball of angry. And it was later described that I had an addiction to the actual squeezing the trigger side of it, which was apparently not uncommon, um, for people in my job at least, which was quite strange to hear. But a few days after this incident was when I was then, well, a decision was made to medically evacuate me from the front lines. But I feel like there was a moment in my mind. I don't know if this is real or not. I don't know, but I feel like there was a moment in my mind where I'd accomplished the sort of ultimate sniper scenario. Um, and maybe it was kind of like, right, that's enough now. I've done it. And everything fell to pieces then. Fell to pieces. It was,
Yeah, I think anecdotally, and like, there's a point where people don't give a fuck anymore. Like
yeah,
that's how they describe it. They go, "I now
yeah,
don't give a fuck.
yeah.
I'm binning this. I'm done."
Yeah, very much so. I didn't care if I lived or died. All I thought about was squeezing that trigger. That's all I wanted to do. It was a horrendous feeling. I, you know, I've grown up as someone that knows the difference between right and wrong. And having then done what I'd done, and got to a point where I couldn't stop thinking about it and wanting to do it again and again. Can you imagine what was happening inside of my mind at that point, where I'm kind of going, what has happened here? I've worked so hard to become a sniper. It took me years to be able to get to this point and do this job. And now I'm doing it, and I'm finding out that this is a fucking horrible job. This is bad. This is really messing with my mind. I now know that snipers that deal with this in different ways. Some are very good at locking it away and keeping it locked away. It's there, It's in all of us. It is in every single one of us. But some people lock it away. Some people, like me, take a peek. I took a peek too early. It just blew up in my face. I now know that people 10 years later are now just having a little look inside that box, and it's having repercussions all this time, after. So in a way, I count myself fairly lucky that I experienced it when I did early on and was able to sort of get it cracked by now. But it was an extremely heavy burden to bear. Made harder, I think, but on the return home, I think when people are kind of saying, I think, it was you or them, and you had to do it. It was your job. You're just doing your job. That's all very good and well. It's not what you want to hear, though. It's not the truth. It isn't. It's part of the truth. Someone saying, it was you or them. No, it wasn't, because I was a sniper and they were not. Their skill set was nowhere near a match of any of ours. So it wasn't going to be one of us. And you couldn't have that mindset anyway. If it did, everything wouldn't have made sense. So yeah, there was a lot of juggling and a lot of conversations that I had with myself constantly for years and years and years on end after that. But I was then returned to Camp Bastion. So sort of there was a slight change, but not for the better, I don't think. I'd been given a job in the stores for a little while, which gave me something to do, but also infuriated me because I was embarrassed. I felt worthless and useless. And, the other sniper lads are still on the front line. They're still doing the job. Everyone else is still fighting for their lives. And I'm sat doing next to nothing in a nice, location that's got a shop and an internet connection and stuff. As I was there doing that, unfortunately, one of our guys were killed and many more were injured, which included a very, very close friend of mine who lost limbs and now has life-changing injuries. And that was extremely difficult to comprehend and to sort of it was a hard pill to swallow that it had actually happened. And that's when this guilt and shame just ramped right up for me. Even though there was nothing I could have done about it. I wasn't even in the same location as him, but it just made me feel even more worthless and almost, I was just like I was like a failure. I felt like a failure, I suppose. And I felt it like it had taken so much to train me, cost so much to train me, and my mind had let me down. I've then let everyone else down. Swings and roundabouts, I suppose.
I think it's interesting that, because obviously being pulled out of one of the things, I think, again, anecdote, is being pulled out from your unit is really tough anyway. Like, you're now out of the front line, you're out of the guys you're close with, and you're in the bloody stores.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm in the
the
stores.
logic fails me. Like, anyone who knows the military is like that. You go from being a sniper to being put in the stores, and that's going to be what good for your health. I can't fathom that as a good
Not at all.
decision.
I remember picking up a clear bag that had my mate's uniform and kit and equipment in it from when he'd been hit by an IED, and kind of looking at this bag and his name tag on it going, what the fuck what am I doing here? This is bollocks. Get me out there. And that was the instigator then. I instantly knew that I had to get back out there. I couldn't finish this tour as a storeman and not on a high. So at this point, we're in the sort of last couple of weeks of our 6-month deployment there. Troops are coming back into Bastion from the front lines, and one of my old commanders was after a group of volunteers to go on an operation for the last 10 days of the tour. And so with that, I threw my hand up in the air and was like, mate, I'm on it. It was decided that if I go and see the doctors and convince everyone that I was good to go, then I could go. So I went to the med centre, saw the psychiatric nurse that told me I had an addiction and was tired. And I agreed with him, said, yeah, you bang on, mate. I was absolutely knackered, but I've had some good kip. I am good to go. So he gave me the green light. I went and saw the adjutant. Same to him. You know, I'm good. Everyone was right. I just needed to have a little bit of rest. But I'm good now. So the decision was made that yes, I could go back out and fight, but not with my sniper rifle. Never knew the reason for that, but
That puzzled me, that because, you know, you're still like, okay, going to send you back out. And obviously, you're probably, I mean, you probably are masking a lot of stuff to get back through the interviews with the psychiatric nurse and the adjutant and that, and then go back out. But then they only give you a rifle. It's kind of like they haven't really ticked the box, have they, mate? They've gone, yeah, you can go back out into combat, but here's an SA-80. And that's quite funny. I hate the SA-80 rifle. But anyway, like,
yeah.
here's your SA-80 instead of my actual weapon.
Yeah. It was like tie one hand behind his back. That was
Yeah,
the
well, I mean,
kind
if you
of vibe
were
I
going
got.
to do something, you'd be better off with your sniper rifle doing the job for which you are now
Yes.
trained and very, very, very good at.
Yeah.
Strange decision. I suppose maybe they thought it was just a good way of helping you out.
Yeah, it definitely did that. If they said no, there would have been probably hell to pay. I think I would have fucking flown off the handle. You know, I wasn't then. I'm not the person that's sat here having this interview then. I was a very, very different kind of guy. So yeah, it would have been shit. But it turned out that nothing really happened on that last 10 days as much as I wanted it to. We didn't fire a single round or have one fired at us, apart from further up on the main supply road that we were protecting. Two Taliban were burying an improvised explosive device for us to go over, and they got vaporized by a Predator drone missile. So I witnessed that. That was crazy to see. And then a couple of days later, we'd stopped in Cyprus, and then I'm back home. I'm naked on a pub table, surrounded by my family and my friends, drinking anything that was within reach, and just these crazy eyes that were so wide, and just this 1,000-yard stare that I used to stand in the mirror, and I'd catch myself sometimes, and it'd be an hour. An hour would have passed, and I'd just be staring at myself in the eyes in this mirror, and these things would be going in my mind, and it was horrendous. That's when it really started then, because there was no more gunfights. There was no more squeezing that trigger. That was over. It was finished. Now I have to come back to map reading lessons and fucking ironing my uniform and polishing my boots and pretending to give a shit about stuff. Whereas all I wanted to do was get back out there. I was at this point now, I'd been home a few weeks. I started looking at transfer options. I wanted to transfer to the next regiment going out to Afghan. I wanted to get back out there because I knew if I stayed here, it was going to go wrong. I felt like I didn't belong here anymore. Everything about me had changed. Although it had driven me bloody crackers over there, it was a lot better than being here. Because here I was sad. I was constant. I was just so sad. There was barely a day where I wouldn't be crying my eyes out and just being in absolute shit state. So the idea of getting shot at was amazing compared to that.
So interesting. I mean, and also in the back of that, you talked about going on selection for the Special Air Service. You were trying to keep physically fit. Was that?
Yeah.
What was that? Was that the same driver you thought by being fit? If I can get into the SAS or do selection will keep me busy, and then I'll be with them, and then I'll do something there rather than. And I know what you mean. Camps, dollars.
Yeah. I needed forward momentum. Like rapidly. I needed it. I needed something. So yeah, fitness became my first priority. Get fit, get my name down, get on selection. By the time that came round, my world had imploded, and it was never a possibility then. I was in trouble with the law, and I was fighting all the time. And then this fitness thing went out the window, and it all became about drink. Every day was drink, because if I was pissed and I punched someone, I could apologise because I was pissed. And it became this excuse that it was like all responsibility could be switched off by just necking a few beers. Now I'm pissed. I'm not, I can't. I can't drive a car now, mate. I'm pissed. I was off the radar in my mind. That worked for a little while, which, drinking a lot and fighting a lot can quite easily go unnoticed, especially in an infantry regiment. It happens all day, every day. But it started to get darker, a lot darker, and these sort of nightmares then had fully formed. Let's put it that way. They had became nightly, every single night, multiple times a night, most of the time. Where one in particular that I'd have most nights would be the young guy who was sort of 20 or 21, looked about the same age as me, that I shot in the throat. He would every night burst into my room, and his eyes would be stitched closed and his mouth would be stitched closed, and he'd have this gaping hole in the side of his neck, and it was so realistic. Every night he'd come and try and drag me out of my bed, try and kill me. There'd be situations where I'd dream that I'd be in a contact and everyone around me, all my mates would be getting killed. And every time I fired, I just wasn't hitting anything and I just couldn't do anything. There would be times when I'd have nightmares, I'd be getting dragged away with my hands tied behind my back and someone would be behind me, but they'd never shoot the Taliban that was about to shoot me. And there was all these dreams. I never made sense of any of them, but every single night, and it was horrendous to the point where I stopped sleeping. I'd stay up for as long as I could, try and just become absolutely exhausted, and then I'd fall asleep and I'd have a nightmare. So it made no difference. So sleep was the enemy. In the days, I was extremely, extremely angry all the time. It was such a short fuse, which wasn't like me. I'd always been, bright, happy, bubbly. Uh, Yeah, this one, it wasn't me.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You did talk when you were in Afghan, because you're obviously really creative with the music, you're a musical guy, and you are clearly creative. Like I can tell that from the writing and all of that. It's like, so you did try with like drawing the dreams and you try with poetry stuff, writing stuff down. Were you still doing that sort of thing? Was that gone now?
Yeah, the drawing and the poems stopped. I think I only did them the once for each sort of nightmare, dream thing, sequence, and then a few poems, maybe 5 or 6 of them, I think I did. After that, it turned to music. So I'd always played guitar since I was like 8 years old. Songwriting then became this thing where I'd write songs and it'd kind of fall into advice that I'd want to give myself in a way, saying things that I felt but couldn't say out loud. And it helped. It was my own kind of version of therapy in a way, before I knew I needed therapy even.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think all creativity can be cathartic and it can be a form of therapy. But then you have this thing at Sunday lunch where you blow up and basically attack your dad, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just because this is really common. Like so many people talk about the anger, the redness, the shutters come down, and sometimes afterwards, like a guy talking about like he was telling me he ended up standing on the bonnet of a car and couldn't remember how he got on the bonnet of the car. He was screaming at the driver. It's like it's these things, just like that is really common.
It was, it's real. It is a real thing. Blackness, and then as soon as that blackness lifted, I'm on top of my dad, strangling him on the floor, and I instantly realised what's going on. Let go, and just gone. What the fuck? What is there? I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand, one, how I've got from here to over here and not remember anything about it. I don't know what. I just didn't know what had happened. It was like this spring that had been coiled for so long had finally popped, and it was dangerous. That could have been a horrendous situation. That luckily we patched it over. It was good. It was understood that I didn't mean that at all. We've got a great relationship. We always have done, me and both my parents. So it wasn't anything personal. It was just.
I think a lot of it's misreading situations because I don't know what he said to you. Do you remember what he said to you or what he did or anything that triggered you? Do you remember? No?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even him. Yeah, it was my sister had leaned her hand over, knocked over a can of Coke, the can had spilt, and then blackness. That's how easy it happens. It was extremely powerful, and it was frightening, really frightening. Same as sort of flashbacks and stuff like that when they started happening. I thought I was dying, panic attacks. I thought I was having a heart attack each time. I just didn't understand what it was, couldn't control it. And also at the same time, trying to keep my mouth shut about what's happening, because I knew that it's probably going to be the end of my career if I start saying something. But once that happened around the dinner table with my parents, that was it then. I had to say something then. I was living at their house when I was, at home. I couldn't be like that. And I didn't want to. So it sounds daft. I was frightened of what I could potentially do elsewhere, anywhere. While driving, road rage was this massive, massive problem for me. Massive. I ended up having multiple incidents where I've chased cars down and started banging on windows. I pulled a guy off his motorbike once. It was fucking erratic, unhinged behaviour that is not acceptable. I knew that. I knew that what I was doing wasn't acceptable, and I had to sort of take responsibility for that. And me saying, "Look, I've got a problem. Something's going on." That was me really starting that journey.
It's really common. I mean, that pattern, like where you get people, and the trouble is like, army's a drinking culture, so people drink, and then they drink when they leave, and they drink when they've got problems. And then if you add in the rage stuff, yeah, they get in trouble with the law, and they get into incidents and fighting. But there's
Yeah,
always like, it seems to me, that gets to a point where the wheels finally come off. Sounds like that thing with your dad was when the wheels finally fall off. And
yeah.
some people never get there, mate. Some people don't get there.
No, they don't, or they get there and it's way too late with the drink, and either the drink stuff gets them, or suicide rates, which is
Yeah, well, that is the other thing, is the suicidal thoughts. People, lots
yeah,
of veterans, we know statistically now this is not good, and also it could take years. You're quite
yeah,
young still when this happened. Some
yeah,
guys do 22 years, come out, and then they're facing the demons on their own and
yeah,
pushing your mates away. That's another really common thing. I always
yeah,
hear that. Like, I know a guy, I can't really say much about it, but like, and he won't. The big thing is he won't connect with his friends, at all. Like, it's a
yeah,
real problem. It's a real issue.
yeah.
So in your case, Ted, you realise you had this, and you go back and see your sergeant, isn't it? And that's
Yeah.
how they refer you.
Yes. So he rang the med centre, and it happened just to happen there was a psychiatric nurse there in camp that day. So yeah, an appointment within an hour, I was sat in front of a psychiatric nurse. But that in itself threw me off, because I thought, why? Why is a psychiatric nurse in camp? Who's seeing a psych nurse? Why? Why are people seeing a psych nurse? Turned out, fucking loads of people were. And I never knew anything. No one knew anything about anyone. No one spoke about sod all. It was like it never existed. It was like I was going to this dark closet at the bottom of a corridor where like people went to end their careers. It was shit, really shit. It was not a fun experience. After that initial meeting with the site nurse, it was deemed that I probably had PTSD, which my first reaction to was, what does this mean? What does this mean for my job? Am I going to lose my job? It was then explained to me that I'd probably take part in therapy and get medication and kind of see how it goes. But I'm not keen on saying this. I've said it a few times, but it is true. I felt like the psych teams in the army were outdated. Like, the pamphlets they were learning from were older than I was, and they weren't ready for what was to come from the Afghan conflict. It was a case of, for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, I'd tell these stories. There'd never be enough time to finish them and get to the end. So nothing had happened. And then I'd have to wait a week and then try and finish the story, get onto the next thing. I was never actually getting any help. Nothing was being taught to me about, techniques that I could use to calm down or ground myself, or what a panic attack is, what a flashback is. So I was just in limbo on a gradual downward slope that ended in a terrible, horrible way, to be honest.
Really, yeah. So, I mean, they put you on. I mean, I think I'd agree with you. I think this whole therapy area is outdated. I think even in the civilian world, the psychiatric profession is way behind on this curve, and a lot of it's self-help, working through various therapists.
Yeah,
But it sounds like they got you on the meds pretty early, and they were pretty much a disaster by the sounds
they
of it.
were horrendous. I think they were horrendous because, so when you go on meds, for instance, antidepressants, it can take a while to find the brand that works for you. And I get that. I understand that. They're not all exactly the same. So instead of that happening, though, what was happening was I'd go on X amount of one brand, and then they'd introduce another brand of the same amount, and I'd double up that dose then. And then they'd add another one in because that lot wasn't working, and another one. In the end, I was taking like 15 tablets a day just to try and, well, the idea was because basically sedate me. That was it. I was in an extreme zombie-like state of sedation. That way I couldn't kick off. It was horrible. It was at the point where we went out for a family meal in a restaurant and I passed out with my face in a restaurant, bang, straight into my dinner plate, just unconscious. I'd be out for 2 days at a time sometimes. It was bad, really bad. They floored me. So I couldn't soldier on then. It was game over for me. So I was then sent home on sick at home leave, having to just then come into camp once a week, see the psych nurse or psychiatrist, depending on who I was seeing, and then bugger off back home again with nothing really to do. I did actually try and do something with my life as I was there. So still in me was this drive to achieve things. So I ended up going to college, started going to music college, learning about music and sound engineering and all this sort of stuff. But I just couldn't do it. I kept losing my rag in classes, and I was not. No, I was not ready for that. So I withdrew from that. And then I'm just sat at home twiddling my thumbs again with my symptoms just getting worse and worse and worse. And then the battalion deployed. We're deploying again, sorry, to Afghan. Very quickly after that news, my mental health fell to shit. And I decided that I was going to kill myself. It was the only way I could see out at the time. It was the only thing that I was in control of, and the only way that I thought I could protect everyone else around me from further hurt. Frustration was a massive percentage of it. Frustration that I wanted to get better so much, and I couldn't. I was doing everything I could, and the help I was getting wasn't helping. What am I meant to do? What am I meant to do here? At this point, nobody I personally knew had taken their own lives, but I knew that veterans were doing it quite often. And it kind of made me start to think that, yeah, it's probably inevitable that, unfortunately, this is how I'm going to die. I'm going to take my own life due to PTSD. So, long story short, I drove to a quiet little place and sat in my car and slit my wrists. I started bleeding out. And as I was kind of going, realised, shit, I don't want to die. I do not want to die at all. I just want this to stop. I was sad. I just kept apologising to myself. "Oh, I'm so sorry, mate. I'm so sorry." And then I got myself bandaged up and ended up the next day. I had an appointment with the psychiatrist, which was a 2-hour drive away from my house that I used to do every week. And they noticed the bandaged up wrists, and I ended up having to spend 3 months then in a psychiatric hospital on the other side of the country, unfortunately, with no contact from anybody. It was very difficult, very, very difficult indeed. That was rock bottom for me. I just
Why
cried.
didn't they? Why? Yeah. Why didn't they let you contact Ted? Was your family? Because there was the woman who helped you when you cut your wrist. There was a woman you talk about in the book. You went to someone
Yes.
and said, "Look,
Yeah.
I'm in trouble,"
Yeah.
and she sounded a really kind person. She sounded like they
Yeah.
wanted your help. And then you knew when you went to the psychiatric appointment. You took. I think you took your stuff with you. You went.
Yeah, I did,
They're
yeah.
gonna nail
Yeah,
this.
I knew
I'm
it
gonna
was
be
coming.
sectioned here, and I'm off to the hospital because anyone who turns up to a psychiatrist with their wrists injured like that is going to be sent to a
Very
psychiatric unit. But I mean, I have to say the program you're on
mm,
was hopeless. I mean, it
yeah.
doesn't sound like they were monitoring your meds. Meds can have a place, I'm sure, in this.
Yeah.
But now you're in a psychiatric unit. What were they not letting you talk to your family, or your family couldn't get there, or what was?
No, so what I'd said to my family, friends I hadn't told where I was going, civilian friends. Family, I'd basically said, if I'm gonna do this, I need to do it on my own. I the last thing I wanted was to be worrying about them or having a weekly conversation where I hear my mum break down in tears because of what's happening to her little boy. I couldn't deal with that. I need the entire world has to revolve around me right now. So in order to do that, I'm going to cut ties. Now, what the nurses on the ward did, they gave weekly updates to my family. As far as the unit were aware, whoever was in charge of the welfare, they did a whoopsie. I was off grid. No one knew where I was. Some people were talking about, has he gone on selection? That, cause, because I was obviously talking about it. Where the fuck is he? Where's he gone? Turns out I was in a nut house, medicated up to the eyeballs, having the most horrendous time. It was bad. I felt like I'd just been thrown on the scrap heap. That I thought I'd performed really well on the tour, and I was kind of thinking, how can they forget me? I don't hold anyone responsible in particular, but it was a shit scenario to go through. And then not long after that 3-month stint, I was sort of deemed well enough to go back home then. The army got back involved. I tried to take my life again. Ended up back in the hospital. And then a few months after that, sort of discharged from that period in hospital, I was medically discharged. It was done. It happened so fast. And I had no idea what the hell was going on. At this point, I'd been seeing the guy that I'd shot in the throat follow me round down the road. I was experiencing some horrendous symptoms. It was horrible. I was living in a nightmare. It was really, really, really bad. I could constantly hear these screams and explosions and gunshots. And yeah, life was really hard. And then I had an older gentleman that was in the Falklands conflict that I used to have little quick little tidbits with. He ended up taking his own life, PTSD, and that just made me kind of think, fucking hell. It reiterated the idea that it's inevitable. I'm gonna die from this, and then life got hard because I got discharged. So everything I loved was gone. All my friends were gone. My career was gone. My way of making a living was gone. My dreams were gone, but I still had PTSD. But I'm now at home in my parents' box room, living a bloody nightmare. Um, the next tour happened then for the Royal Welsh. More friends got killed. More friends got injured, lost limbs. And then after that, so many friends killed themselves. Just
Yeah.
so many.
And it sounds like your instructor, Daz, you call him Daz in the book, he was your
Yeah,
instructor. So it's like when one of your instructors is killed, I think that I was talking about that close bond with the
yeah,
instructors and the guys you're with. I'm not saying that any soldier getting killed doesn't affect you, but it's that very.
yeah. You've got that bond. It's someone that you can hear their laugh in your head. You know that person. To see another, face after face after face popping up on the news, and that's another thing that doesn't get talked about. Do you know what I mean? No one really expects that. You can't prep for it, I suppose. Well, unless you can, I don't know. But it's just another. It was a layer on top of a very thin layer of ice between me, you know, it nearly made me do it again. But then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that again. I don't want to die. I do not want to die. And I'm going to strive to change this. And the idea, like hearing of how many troops and veterans were killing themselves now at this point became a bit of a driving force for me. And this was over years and years where I was determined that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to find a way. I was constantly searching for something that I could read or hear someone talk about how they'd gone through this and come through the other side. I never found that. So it was all imaginary for me, but I imagined this world where I was better and everything was good, and then I could pass on some help. That is what this bloody big
Yeah,
thing.
no, totally, mate, totally. I mean, it's interesting because the therapies, like you were in presumably cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the talking therapy. But as a mate of mine said, how many times do you want to talk about when the bomb went off? They don't
Yeah,
allow hypnotherapy, which seems to be fairly effective. They put you on the
yeah,
meds, but that made your weight go balloon. You're 6 stone overweight at one point,
yeah.
so you can't
That
take
was horrible.
exercise.
No, I had no motivation. It was just horrendous. But the CBT, so the cognitive behavioral therapy, that was addressing things like my anger and irritability. It was addressing why my brain was going from A to B, why I was flying off the handle, and how I address that sort of stuff. You know, it's how you calm yourself down. It's learning part of these techniques that you can ground yourself with and make yourself a little toolkit of stuff that works for you. And it does work. At first, I was very dubious about sort of going, don't know if this is going to work. Sounds a bit lame. I was wrong. I hold my hand. I was very wrong. It does bloody work. It. I feel like the CBT allowed me to work on the foundations of what was causing me problems every single day, as in my outbursts of anger, and then how I'd feel after that, or how that person I'd had an outburst with would feel. People having to walk on eggshells around me because of how I was. It allowed me to address that kind of stuff, or at least start to.
And
But
then and the anchoring, someone did one of the this guy Doug, you call him Doug in the book. He sounds really useful. I think if
yeah,
you see him both before you go traveling and after you go traveling, you see him, and he sounded
yeah,
like because I think sometimes people find someone in the end. Like therapists are not one size fits all, are they? They seems to be like
no,
sometimes you plug in and there's one person who seems to be able to help you, and then the other one's one. So like
yeah,
Doug is helpful, and he teaches the anchoring techniques, doesn't he? Which seems to help.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, so he addressed that stuff. So when I'd have a panic attack or a flashback, how I recover from that, or sometimes how I stop a flashback if I feel it coming on. How I would then go about, ground myself, make sure what can I hear, what can I see, what can I smell, what can I touch, and it brings you to the moment where you are now. You're not over there. So a flashback, for instance, dead quick, is when like a trigger, so a smell or a sound or something, reminds your nervous system of the time that it was in survival mode. So Afghan, constantly in bloody survival mode. So the smell of dust would throw my mind straight back to a time when I could smell hot dust and I'm getting shot at. And it just takes over. Your survival response takes over because it's kept you alive. That's what it is. But it's extremely bloody scary. It's horrible. The first time it happened was absolutely horrendous. It was frightening the life out of me. Absolutely frightening the life out of me.
Was that the armory? Because you talk about when you
Yeah.
signed your sniper's rifle back out, so it's still got the dust of Afghanistan, and you literally get the same weapon out of the armory now in the UK.
Yes.
It all sort of comes rushing back, yeah?
Yeah. The smell and the sight from looking down the sight instantly started to get this hot, overwhelming, burning feeling all over my neck and ringing in my ears, and then my eyes closed down to blackness, and then I could hear a firefight. I could hear and smell and feel the heat of Afghanistan. It was as real as this right now. It was, and then all of a sudden, snap, and I was back, and I've got everyone looking at me going, "All right," and I kind of play it
Yeah.
off as like the worst hangover I've ever had in my life, and I'm kind of right. Give my weapon away. Sign that back in for me. I'm out of here.
And so then I'm just going to talk a little bit about, so the things you did, so marijuana, that helped maybe a
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah. The sort of plant medicine side of things. Yeah. So this was something I'd learned about. I'd done a lot of research into it because I heard about how the Americans were using it. Now, for years at this point, I've not had a nightmare. It's every night. Most nights I'll probably get 3, 4 if I'm lucky hours sleep, and that'd be broken up. So it's horrendous. And then one day I smoked a joint. I'd read, like I said, all the stuff that veterans in particular in the US were saying it was helping with. And so I did it. And that night I fell straight asleep and I slept all through the night and then no nightmares. I couldn't believe it. Can you imagine like getting a full battery charge after years? It was amazing. I'd slept. So I tried it again the next night and the same thing happened. No nightmare. And then the more I sort of got into how can this be used? I wasn't, I didn't want to be a pothead by any means. I didn't want to live by this smoking weed all day long, and but what I did want to do was figure out how I can use it. So it allowed me, I figured out, to come right down from, say, an angry outburst where I'm at a 10 within 30 seconds of smoking or vaporizing that would be right down. So it was a great way for me to bring things back to a normal level. But it also allowed me to go almost deeper in thought into why I'd done the things I'd done, and like I talked about earlier, the context of how I put all these things in context together to come up with the answers of why I did this, why I felt this way, why did I think that particular thing as I squozed the trigger, or all these things. It allowed me to remain calm enough to actually do the work that needed to be done. As for psilocybin, so magic mushrooms, that had a similar effect where I would microdose, which is an extremely tiny, tiny amount, not enough to, set you off in any way or make you feel weird. You don't really notice the difference except for sort of minor mood lifts. My mood would be more on a plateau of okay. And it also allowed me, which is now been supported by science, that psilocybin helps the promotion of growing new neural pathways in your brain. This is those motorways that go from incident happens to anger. Well, now they're growing new ones where incident happens and maybe it doesn't have to go to anger. It can go to stay calm and no one got hurt, never mind. Which is my approach to life now, where if someone cut me up on a roundabout years ago, that was the end of the world, and now I'm just like, never mind, it's okay. Give me a little vibe and smile, and it doesn't matter. That's my outlook on life now. It's the world's a happy place once more. But talking about the sort of the plant medicine side of things with the cannabis and the psilocybin, and there was also DMT, which you've read about, the dimethyltryptamine, which I won't go into because people can do their own research on it. But it's a subject that I don't know. I get mixed responses for, because the typical squaddy mentality is drugs are bad, that is illegal, don't do it. Where I've got to beg to differ. I've got to, because I've done it and I've seen the results.
Well, if squaddies are mass self-medicating with the worst drug in the world, which is alcohol, they might stop doing that and try another drug, because actually the impact of those other drugs is more positive than alcohol, which is ultimately a massive depressant and not good for your health. And the after effects, as we know, are pretty horrendous. Was there a point where you quit drinking completely? Did you quit, or do you quit, or you still?
I didn't. Kind of, yes, I say that, but now I drink on special occasions because I just realised it's no good. It was no good for me. I didn't like who I became after having one too many, that's for sure. And the bloody hangovers, oh my God. I'm a right moody bastard the next day, and I can't afford to do that. I'm too bloody busy, to be honest. Too busy, got loads going on. And it's just detrimental mental health effects of getting pissed, even once a week was enough to, I'm not interested anymore. I'm not bothered. I
You,
don't
you
need
and me
it.
are two veterans sitting here, but I did some work with the Veterans Charity, and I was really surprised when everyone went to the bar and had a few too many every night. I thought that is not helping this situation.
Yeah,
I mean, I've quit drinking, by the way, so I'm like done with that. But that's
yeah, it
partly a
doesn't
health. That's
interest
for lots of
me.
reasons.
Yeah, I'm like, I think I went to a wedding a few weeks ago. I had like maybe 4 drinks, and that was, and that was it. And I paid for it the next bloody day.
And so, well, you call it doing. So, I would like you call it doing the work. What would you describe doing the work as then, Ted? What's your kind of that massive journey you've been on from being in this amazing top sniper, the things you've done, which you have dealt with yourself, internalized, and you've been through this pathway. You now say doing the work. So, what is your kind of thing now?
I can't, otherwise it'd take me ages to talk about 90 things that helped me doing the work. But there was absolutely therapy in general. Go and see a therapist, even if there's nothing wrong with you. It's good for you. It is bloody good for you. There's nothing quite like walking out of a therapist's office and going, "Oh, I've shook that off. That's look like it feels great. It's good for you. It's good to get a professional's perspective on your problems." Another massive one was breathing exercises. This was something that significantly helped me reduce anger, reduce anxiety, recover from panic attacks, flashbacks, things like that. Stuff like box breathing, for instance. So for anyone that doesn't know, breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, out through your mouth for 4 seconds, and you hold it for 4 seconds. And the circle just goes round. That's one. There's other ones. So different time lengths. So for instance, 5, 7, 8 breathing. Breathe in through your nose for 5 seconds. You hold it for 7 seconds and then out for 8. Now the longer out breaths, this one's good for anxiety. Longer out breaths let your body know that you're okay, you're safe, because when you're not okay, you're breathing like that. But if you're everything's fine, it lets you know. And it's about, I think the whole process, you have to be kind to yourself in the recovery from any sort of mental health, but in PTSD in particular. Be kind, meditate, stretch, breathe, and do thought diaries. Now, this is someone I was talking to. So I've kind of found myself in a position now where I'm talking to veterans every day, or even serving soldiers who are going through some kind of situations, and I'm giving this advice to people. But my go-to is always a thought diary. So the idea of a thought diary is that you have different columns, and say, let's use road rage, for instance, as an example. Someone cuts you up on a roundabout, you get angry, and then fly off the handle, start screaming and shouting, chase someone down the road. The idea is that every day you write down emotions that have come up in your day. So say that anger came up, you write that down. Now, what caused that anger? Someone cut me up on a roundabout. What did you think? I thought he was a dickhead. That was dangerous. Could have put me in danger. The reality is then, so you look at what's called an unhelpful thinking bias. Now, this is too much to go into right now. There's certain ways that you can see things, see the world through like lenses. So black and white thinking, for instance, is this is right, that's wrong. There's no grey in between. It's either this or that. Or mind reading, where I know you think I'm a piece of shit. I know that for a fact. Well, obviously I don't, because I can't. Do you know what I mean? Those kind of things.
Yeah,
So
no,
what have I
cognitive
seen that
bias. Yeah.
situation through? And then the alternative. What could I have done? Well, nobody got hurt. So I didn't even have to brake hard. It was actually no problem at all. No one was disrespecting me, which was something that always used to come up if I got a funny look. And it's, you respect me because I've done
Yeah.
it. And it's just an ego thing that got built up over time, I think. But it's about dropping those things. It's very hard to transition from the military life to a civilian one, and you have to drop things along the way. You can keep things like that. Constant readiness, I thought, was something that was a skill I'd learned in the army that I had to maintain and constantly every day be always aware and alert of what's happening. Realised, or I was taught, that was actually a learnt behaviour that was keeping my PTSD alive. So the idea of me walking down a street and checking every window or checking rooftops and looking and scanning areas for no real reason, there's no reason, no one's attacking me here down the street. But by doing that, that part of my brain and my nervous system is still going, we must have, it might have been a while, but we're still in danger. So let's just keep all that fresh there. Right, just in case we need it. So it's doing things like that. Like I used to have my curtains closed all the time. Now I'll keep them open. Even at night, I will open them for a bit to expose myself to being uncomfortable. And there would be things like my trainers and shoes, laces that have to be tied mega tight in case, for any reason, a moment's notice, I have to sprint and run. So Doug, the therapist, made me start walking around with loose laces on my trainers to make me uncomfortable, make me realise nothing. Yes, something could happen. I could get hit by a bus. Like, you can't think that way. And especially with PTSD, because it literally fuels the fire. So the more I let go and the more I started to relax, and I kind of just stopped noticing the PTSD. It wasn't at the forefront of my mind. It used to be. The second I woke up, it was there until the second I went to sleep. And then I'd forget about it. And as therapy went on, we started doing what's called EMDR. So it's called, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. This is a form of therapy where you follow either a finger going from left to right, or a light bar, or they might tap on your knees left to right. What it does is replicate what happens in your brain when you're in REM sleep, so rapid eye movement sleep. Your eyes move from left to right, and they go backwards, processing memories. Now, PTSD memories or traumatic memories are too traumatic to be done on its own. It can't be done. So you need to manually do this process, and that's what EMDR does. So you notice the events in your mind as your eyes are moving from left to right, and then the therapist will interject every sort of 30 seconds, 60 seconds or so. And as time goes by, you disconnect the emotions that are attached to those memories, which is how I'm now able to talk about these things. I'm able to talk about shooting that guy in the throat and how horrific was. Like, I still see that in my mind. It's like very much right there, right now. But it doesn't have that effect on me. It's never going to disappear, because you can't just forget stuff, can you? But you can definitely learn to remove the emotion from it and move on. Context. I keep referring to context. Context is king. It's why everything happens. So the more I could learn about that, understand why I did it, and understand what's happening in my brain when it was going wrong, and then I started to learn the therapy stuff, and eventually gone. PTSD was gone.
How did you access the EMDR? Because I know veterans will be listening to this, people who maybe know people. How did
Yeah.
you access that?
So that was through an organisation called NHS Veterans Wales. Now, I had to wait 12 months, unfortunately, for me to get in there. They're extremely underfunded and understaffed. But you like to pay for a therapist, might be like 50 quid to go for a session. Now, rather than going on the piss down the pub and spending 50 quid, I'd suggest going and speak to a therapist. I did 10 sessions of EMDR and it was done. Gone. And never again has it reared its ugly head. It's changed my entire world. It's changed the people around me's world, because I'm back now. I'm here. Not that steely-eyed dealer of death that was created over there. I was not, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm happy all the bloody time.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds. I mean, Ted, looking at you now, you're not overweight, you're not on meds. You seem like your life's good. You've got a great book. It's like it's good to hear this stuff and to hear
Yeah.
people who maybe and connect with people who are struggling, because there's a lot of them out there, and then there is a journey through that. I think one of the things I'm sort of hearing, and I do hear this a lot, is there's not a one size fits all solution to this stuff.
No, there isn't. My recovery was very much a culmination of all sorts of things. The mindfulness and sort of meditation side of things, that that played a big part in it. That was the sort of compassionate side that I needed, because you need to be compassionate towards yourself. You need to understand, I went through something horrendous, and it might be really uncomfortable to think that. And, you might think about stigma or what other people think of you. But the reality is, that does not matter. What matters is that whoever is struggling gets through it. And it all begins with self-love and compassion. Understanding that, yes, you went through something difficult, you went through something traumatic. It doesn't define who you are. It might be defining who you are at the moment, but it doesn't. It's not who you are. There ways to get better. So I was told by my doctors in the army that PTSD was forever and that I'd just have to learn to live with it. That nearly killed me. Now, this is why I was searching so intently for someone that had got through it. You know, I'd seen people sort of openly struggling. And sort of Craig Harrison, for instance, the sniper that wrote The Longest Kill. He's been very open over the years about his mental health struggles from the job, and so have many other people, you know. But I'd never seen anyone come through the other side. The idea of having it forever, that's what nearly killed me. So I am very much here to sort of say that this isn't forever. It can be got rid of, you know, and that's what my talking events are all about. This is what the Unwind and Remind book is all about. So exclusively on tedshirley.co.uk, this is my new creation, right? It's called Unwind and Rewind. So what it is a book filled of all these things that helped me along the way. It's a colouring book. The idea is that you read all these things and it goes into what's good for you, what helped me along the way. So there's like 90 pages of tips there. So I'm trying to get this information out there in all forms that I can, because this is like my calling. I'm here to help, but I can't help everyone individually on one-to-one basis. It's just not doable for me. But the books can do that. So hopefully.
It's great you're doing this, Ted. And I think that one of the things and you talked about this in your book, is the stigma around you're weak, you're a blag, you're a head case. All this is the thing. And also being men, it can be very difficult to take the very first step. And usually it takes some massive crisis to get someone over the line where they actually do something, like just go talk to a therapist. Maybe not the guy you spoke to who told you it was incurable, because that's really bad advice.
Don't go to an army one.
Don't go to an army therapist. Well, I don't know yet. Don't go to an army one. But the thing is that there is help out there. And I think that's the thing. You got to try and find some, because you can't just do this on your own.
No, you can't. It's so easy to become a recluse and just stay away from people. It's easy to stay away from people that challenge your thoughts. And it's also something I realized along the journey. You've got what I call, and loads of people have called, drains and radiators. So some people radiate positive energy. They're the people you need to be around. Pessimistic, negative people, they're not going to help you in this situation. You need to be positive. You need to look for the future, stop looking back, and just go step by step. I believe now, in hindsight, it could have been possible for me to recover while still in that job if everything was done correctly. Now, funding wasn't, I don't know, for many, many reasons that didn't happen, but you can do a lot of it on your own. The stuff, I always say this, the most helpful stuff that I ever encountered in this entire journey came out of my own mouth. And that is the case for most of the people that I know that are getting help. They'll be like the aha moment of, oh my God, yeah. And it's those moments when you sort of say, oh, I did this and I thought this, and how did that make you feel? Like, typical therapist questions that will make you give these answers. I'd say trust the process and trust the professionals. Finding the right therapist for you, like you said earlier, it's a thing. I went through many. Some did great stuff, some didn't work with me. Find a good therapist, but for the sake of like 50 quid of going to find out, I'd do that every time. That is always a bit of advice that I'd give, 100%. And read the bloody book.
Ted, read Ted's book, buy his book. We'll put all that in the show notes. Ted, this has been fantastic. So the final thing, is there any final parting words to people from yourself and the wisdom that you've imparted in the last 2 hours?
Something that I'm always surprised by, that people don't think that anyone wants to help them. Everyone wants to help you. Everyone that loves you for whatever reason, and they want that person to be the best version of them that they can be. So do it for not only yourself, but do it for the people around you. Because I know it was dead rewarding when I sort of snapped back to life and everyone around me kind of went, oh shit, he's back. Yeah, I'm back. And I'm going to write a book.
Very good. Ted Shirley, thanks so much. I'll hold the book up. Here we go. Afghanistan Sniper. Please read this book. It's very, very good. Yeah, no, thanks for the interview, mate.
Thank you, Tom. It's been lovely to meet you.
yeah, keep spreading the good word. Thank you.
I certainly will, my friend. I'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, mate.
Take care.